So we're going to start. I have two pieces here for sweat soldering. I'm going to lay my top piece on top of the bottom piece where I want it to be soldered. And today I just have two scraps. And then I'm going to flip it over and draw on the back of my top piece with a pencil so I know where it overlaps. Take off the bottom piece and set it aside. And now on the top piece I know where I need to put my solder. So I'll put this down on the charcoal block, get my flux, and I'm going to paint on my flux. Okay. I could paint it on the whole thing. I'm just going to put it where I'm going to add my solder. And with the tweezers, I'm going to pick up my solder pallions and put these little pieces, spread them out, and put them where I want to solder my top piece onto my bottom piece, making sure to keep the solder within the lines that I just drew. Okay, I'm adding, I don't know, I'm spacing out the solder a little bit so when it melts it'll end up covering most of the area. Okay, I'm going to put one more maybe on the edge here where this hole is. Then I'm going to start up my torch. I'm going to make sure that when I start to add the heat that I'm starting from far away. Can't even see my torch right now. I'm starting from far away because if I hit that flux right away with my torch, the flux is going to bubble and all the solder pieces are going to jump off and you're going to have to reapply all the solder. So I'm starting from far away to heat my flux and get it to boil off, and then I'm slowly going to get closer and closer once that flux is heated away. And I'm going to move closer with my torch. See, it's starting to boil. That flux is starting to bubble, so I don't want my solder to jump off. And I'm getting closer with my torch, and I'm just going around the area. And you'll see that the solder is going to ball up and then it will puddle out. It'll spread out like a puddle. There we go. I'm going to turn it off. Then I'm going to pick up my piece of metal with my tweezers and quench it in water. Then I can pull it out with my hands because it's cool enough. And you can see that the solder has puddled now. After I've quenched it, I can pickle it for about 10 minutes and rinse it off. The solder will be like tiny hills, so I'm going to sand it down with about 400 sandpaper just to make sure that that's all level. I've quenched and pickled my first piece, which has solder melted onto it. It's puddled. Now it's all cleaned up. I sanded it to make sure that the puddles weren't too bumpy. I'm going to take my background piece now and put it on top of this steel screen, which you notice is on a tripod, okay? Because we're going to heat from underneath. Solder flows towards the heat. So if we heat underneath, the top sheet should heat down, melt down with that solder. So right now I'm painting on some flux. And then I'm going to sandwich, make sure I put this in the right place where I intended it to go. I'm going to line them up. Now these are just two scraps, like I said. Okay. And now I'm going to heat from underneath with my torch. So I'm going to light my torch. I can start from above to get that flux heated and bubbling. So we're at the right temperature. I can see the flux bubbling. And then I'll take my torch tip and slowly turn it upside down and heat from underneath. Like I said, solder flows towards the heat. So if I'm heating underneath it, the solder from the top sheet should flow and stick on the bottom sheet. I'm just moving my torch in circles around where that solder is. And I'm not touching the cone of my torch tip to it, sort of right in front of that cone. And I'm just going in circles with my torch tip. I can also use a poker to come in and push this down. You'll know when the solder flows when you see it starting to come out around the edges, which I'm seeing right here. And when I push down, I definitely see it. So my solder has flowed, and I'm slowly going to turn this back the right way and turn off my torch tip. And pick up my piece with my tweezers and quench it in the water. And now they're connected. You can see the solder flowed here. There's a little bit of a puddle there. But these two are definitely connected. So now I'll throw this in the pickle to get that discoloration off from being oxidized by the heat. And then I'll take it out, steel wool it, and polish it. If there's a huge solder puddle, you can sand that off and then steel wool and polish.